is up, Stack and Ohana? This is Aloha Stacker, and welcome back to the channel and another video. And in today's video, we bring back History Mondays. And today we're going to be talking about George Washington, if you couldn't figure it out. But first, I got my first piece of mail here in Spain, and I wanted to show it off. And you'll never guess who it's from, or maybe you will, I don't know. It is from the Austrian Stacker. So our friend Austrian Stacker has sent us, let's see where we put this, put that right there. And he has sent me a nice letter and he says, "Welcome to Europe, my friend. I hope the move went well and you are already enjoying beautiful España. Great that the hashtag Eurostackers got a new awesome member. Let us know if we can support you in any way. Yours, AS." So that was a very nice note from Austrian Stacker, but he also sent a gift. So let's see what that gift was. Well, first, it looks like we have a whole bunch of Eurostacker stickers. So check this out. So he sent me a whole bunch of Eurostacker stickers, and the good news with these is these will be going out with any channel mail that I do in the future. So once I finish up using all these, I'll figure out how to get more. Maybe he can send me the logo and I can have these made on my own as well. So thank you very much, Austrian Stacker. Very cool. But that's not it, everybody. He also sent me this. Check that out. That is a Maria Theresa Thaler, 1 Thaler. Look at that beauty. This is absolutely stunning. I've shown one of these off before, but I do not have one in this type of condition. This condition is absolutely stunning. And I have a little bit of information on this. So Maria Theresa, well, she was the Queen of Hungary and Bohemia. She reserved her empress title in 1745 after her husband Francis Stephan was elected Holy Roman Emperor. With her new title, Empress Maria Theresa courageously defended her lands and rights with Britain as her main foreign support during the War of Austrian Succession. The coin comes with an extensive history and is known to be one of the most beautiful and widely circulated silver coins to date. This is a coin restrike that could have been minted from 1780 through 1858, and I don't know, I'm guessing they're still minting these today. The obverse portrays a mature Maria Theresa wearing a widow's veil and brooch with 9 pearls. Right there. The perimeter of the obverse has the inscription Maria Theresa DGRIMP HUBO which translates to Maria Theresa, by the grace of God, Roman Empress of Hungary and Bohemia Queen. Below the bust, you can find the inscription SF, which translates to the 2 names of the Günzburg mint officials in 1780, who was responsible for the mintage of the original coin. Let's see if we can find that, the SF. Yep, right there at the bottom. The S is for Tobias Schobel, and the F is for Joseph Fabi. The reverse features an imperial double-headed eagle, arms of Austria, at the center, surrounded by 4 quarters representing Hungary, Bohemia, Burgundy, and Burgau, or Günzburg. The inscription around the perimeter reads, Archid AVST DUX BURG CO TYR 1780, and that translates to the Archduchess of Austria, Duchess of Burgundy, Countess of Tyrol, 1780. So the coin features, well, these were made of 0.833 fine silver with a weight of 28 grams. So we have about 0.7517 of a troy ounce. So 3/4 of a troy ounce. It's produced by the Austrian Mint. It has a $1 denomination. And that is about it with the coin. So that is pretty cool. Thank you very much, Austrian Stacker. Let's go ahead and put that right here before we get to our, let's see if I can make this nice and, there you go. It's a beautiful interpretation and it's a beautiful gift. Thank you so much, Austrian Stacker. That is so awesome. Now let's move on to the commemorative coin. And this is from the United States Mint. It's the Presidential Silver Medals Program. And here's the coin right here. Comes in this nice box, very beautiful. And then you take the outer casing off. We'll put that here. And then you have an inner box. Now we'll take that box off. And inside that box, we get a Presidential Medals Silver Program, a certificate of authenticity, which reads, Certificate of Authenticity, Presidential Silver Medals Program. The United States Mint certifies that this is a genuine presidential silver medal minted and authorized under 31 USC, blah, blah, blah. This medal was minted by the Department of the Treasury of the United States, signed by David Ryder, JVJ Ryder, Director of the U.S. Mint. It has the specifications. It's 99.39 fine silver, just about 1.6 inches in diameter, weighs 1 troy ounce, or 31.103 grams, and it's got a plain edge. And that is it for that. Let's put that down here. Now that comes in a beautiful satin type green case. And we open this up and we see the United States Mint logo, and here is the coin. Let's go ahead and get this coin out and then we'll talk about it a little bit. As you can see, we've got George Washington, President of the United States, 1789. On one side, we have a flat edge, not reeded, and then on this side, it says peace and friendship. So let's talk about this coin a little bit. So these coins are medals. Well, I guess they're not coins, they're medals, excuse me. This is to honor President George Washington. The obverse of the medal features a portrait of George Washington with the inscription, George Washington, President of the United States, and 1789 centered along the border of the medal. Now, these were started to be minted in 2018. The reverse of the medal, right here, where it says peace and friendship, it is the inscription. It's symbolized by two hands clasped in a token of amity. On the cuff of the left wrist are 3 stripes with buttons, each button carrying the American eagle. The other wrist is bare. Above hands is a pipe of peace, and a tomahawk are crossed over each other. So that is a pretty cool, and this is the first in the series of medals. Now there's a whole bunch of these already out, but this was the first one. And the reason I picked to show off George Washington, because A, it's the only one that I own so far, and B, he's my favorite president, hands down. My favorite president, and so that is a very beautiful, beautiful coin. So let's go ahead and shift over. Oops, look what I did. So you can see I'm still gaining supplies. So every video I have a little bit closer to, there we go, let's get this. Come on, stay, George. All right, awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about President George Washington and a little bit of biography of the man, the myth, and the legend. George Washington was Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783 and served 2 terms as the first U.S. president from 1789 to 1797. The son of a prosperous planter, Washington was raised in colonial Virginia. As a young man, he worked as a surveyor, then fought in the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763. During the American Revolution, he led the colonial forces to victory over the British and became a national hero. In 1787, he was elected president of the convention that wrote the U.S. Constitution. 2 years later, Washington became the first American president. Realizing that the way he handled the job would impact how future presidents approached the position, he handed down a legacy of strength, integrity, and national purpose. Less than 3 years after leaving office, he died at his Virginia plantation, Mount Vernon, at age 67. So let's talk about his early years. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732 at his family's plantation on Pope's Creek in Westmoreland County in the British colony of Virginia to Augustine Washington and his second wife, Mary Ball Washington. George, the eldest of Augustine and Mary Washington's 6 children, spent much of his childhood at Ferry Farm, a plantation near Fredericksburg, Virginia. After Washington's father's death when he was 11, it's likely he helped his mother manage the plantation. And did you know, at the time of death, in 1799, of his death, George Washington owned some 300 enslaved people. However, before his passing, he became opposed to slavery, and in his will, he ordered that his enslaved workers be freed after his wife's death. Few details about Washington's early education are known, although children of prosperous families like his typically were taught at home by private tutors or attended private schools. It's believed he finished his formal schooling at around age 15. As a teenager, Washington, who had shown an aptitude for mathematics, became a successful surveyor. His surveying expeditions into the Virginia wilderness earned him money to acquire land of his own. And that was awesome. Oh boy, follies they begin. Let's get that fixed real quick before we move on. So trying out this new camera angle seems to have made a nice little tumble, but that's okay. Guess what? That's all part of the fun of making videos, everybody. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next page. So in 1751, Washington made his only trip outside of America, where he traveled to Barbados with his older half-brother Lawrence Washington, who was suffering from tuberculosis and hoped the warm climate would help him recuperate. Shortly after their arrival, George contracted smallpox. He survived, although the illness left him with permanent facial scars. In 1752, Lawrence, who had been educated in England and served as Washington's mentor, died. Washington eventually inherited Lawrence's estate, Mount Vernon, on the Potomac River near Alexandria, Virginia. In December 1752, Washington, who had no previous military experience, was made a commander of the Virginia militia. He saw action in the French and Indian War and was eventually put in charge of all of Virginia's militia forces. By 1759, Washington had resigned his commission, returned to Mount Vernon, and was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he served until 1774. In January 1759, he married Martha Dandridge Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children. Washington became a devoted stepfather to her children. He and Martha Washington never had any offspring of their own. In the ensuing years, Washington expanded Mount Vernon from 2,000 acres into an 8,000-acre property with 5 farms. He grew a variety of crops, including wheat, corn, bred mules, and maintained fruit orchard and a successful fishery. He was deeply interested in farming and continually experimented with new crops and methods of land conservation. By the late 1760s, Washington had experienced firsthand the effects of rising taxes imposed on American colonists by the British, and he became to believe that it was in the best interest of the colonists to declare independence from England. Washington served as a delegate to the First Continental Congress in 1774 in Philadelphia. By the time the Second Continental Congress convened a year later, the American Revolution had begun in earnest, and Washington was named Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Washington proved to be a better general than military strategist. His strength lay not in his genius on the battlefield, but his ability to keep the struggling colonial army together. His troops were poorly trained and lacked food, ammunition, and other supplies. Soldiers sometimes even without shoes in winter. However, Washington was able to give them the direction and motivation. His leadership during the winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge was a testament to his power to inspire his men to keep going. Over the course of the grueling 8-year war, the colonial forces won few battles but consistently held their own against the British. In October 1781, with the aid of the French, who allied themselves with the colonists over their rivals, the British, the Continental forces were able to capture British troops under General Charles Cornwallis in the Battle of Yorktown. This action effectively ended the Revolutionary War, and Washington was declared a national hero. In 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Great Britain and the United States, Washington, believing he had done his duty, gave up his command of the army and returned to Mount Vernon, intent on resuming his life as a gentleman farmer and family man. However, in 1787, he was asked to attend the Constitutional Convention of Philadelphia and head the committee to draft a new constitution. His impressive leadership there convinced the delegates that he was by far the most qualified man to become the nation's first president. At first, Washington balked. He wanted to, at last, return to a quiet life and home, leave governing the new nation to others, but public opinion was so strong that eventually he gave in. The first presidential election was held on January 7th, 1789, and Washington won handily. John Adams, who received the second largest number of votes, became the nation's first vice president. The 57-year-old Washington was inaugurated on April 30th, 1789 in New York City. Because Washington, D.C., America's future capital city, wasn't built yet. He lived in New York and Philadelphia. While in office, he signed a bill establishing a future permanent U.S. capital along the Potomac River, the city later named Washington, D.C., in his honor. Let's go ahead and flip the coins so we can get a new view, so you can enjoy a secondary view. Okay, you don't want to stay? Then we'll just put them like that. Okay. In 1783, we already passed that part. So, the United States was a small nation when Washington took office, consisting of 11 states and approximately 4 million people. And there was no precedent for how a new president should conduct domestic or foreign business. Mindful that his actions would likely determine how future presidents were expected to govern, Washington worked hard to set an example of fairness, prudence, and integrity. In foreign matters, he supported cordial relations with other countries, but also favored a position of neutrality in foreign conflicts. Domestically, he nominated the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Jay, signed a bill establishing the First National Bank of the United States, and set up his own presidential cabinet. His two most prominent cabinet appointees were Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, two men who disagreed strongly on the role of federal government. Hamilton favored a strong central government and was part of the Federalist Party, while Jefferson favored stronger states' rights as part of the Democratic-Republican Party. Washington believed that divergent views were critical for the health of the new government, but he was distressed at what he saw as emerging partisanship. George Washington's presidency was marked by a series of firsts. He signed the first United States copyright law protecting the copyright of authors. He also signed the first Thanksgiving Proclamation, making November 26th a national day of Thanksgiving for the end of the War of American Independence and the successful ratification of the Constitution. During Washington's presidency, Congress passed the first federal revenue tax, or first federal revenue law, a tax on distilled spirits. In July 1794, farmers from western Pennsylvania rebelled over the so-called whiskey tax. Washington called in over 12,000 militiamen to Pennsylvania to dissolve the Whiskey Rebellion in one of the first major tests of authority of the national government. Under Washington's leadership, the states ratified the Bill of Rights, and 5 new states were entered the Union: North Carolina, Rhode Island, Vermont, Kentucky, and Tennessee. In his second term, Washington issued a proclamation of neutrality to avoid entering the 1793 war between Great Britain and France, but when French minister to the United States, Edmund Charles Genet, also known as Citizen Genet, toured the United States, or Genet, I'm guessing it's Genet, he boldly flaunted the proclamation, attempting to set up armed American ports as French military bases and gain support for his cause in the western United States. His meddling caused a stir between Federalists and Democratic Republicans, widening the rift between parties and making consensus building more difficult. In 1795, Washington signed the Treaty of Amity, Commerce, and Navigation, between His Britannic Majesty and the United States of America, or Jay's Treaty, so named for John Jay, who had negotiated with the government of King George III. It helped the U.S. avoid war with Great Britain, but also wrinkled certain members of Congress back home and was fiercely opposed by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Internationally, it caused stir among the French, who believed it violated previous treaties between the United States and France. Washington's administration signed two other influential international treaties. Pinckney's Treaty of 1795, also known as the Treaty of San Lorenzo, established friendly relations between the United States and Spain, or España, firming up borders between the American traders, or between the U.S. and Spanish territories in North America, and opening up the Mississippi to American traders. The Treaty of Tripoli, signed the following year, gave American ships access to the Mediterranean shipping lanes in exchange for a yearly tribute to the Pasha of Tripoli. In 1796, after 2 terms of presidents and declining to serve a 3rd term, Washington finally retired. In Washington's farewell address, he urged the new nation to maintain the highest standards domestically and to keep involvement with foreign powers to a minimum. The address is still read each February in the U.S. Senate to commemorate Washington's birthday, even though apparently they don't listen. Washington returned to Mount Vernon and devoted his attentions to making the plantation as productive as it had been before he became president. More than 4 decades of public service had aged him, but he was still a commanding figure. In December 1799, he caught a cold after inspecting his properties in the rain. The cold developed into a throat infection, and Washington died on the night of December 14th, 1799, at age 67. He was entombed at Mount Vernon, which in 1960 was designated a National Historic Landmark. Washington left one of the most enduring legacies of any American in history. Known as the father of his country, his face appears on the U.S. dollar bill and quarter, and dozens of U.S. schools, towns, counties, as well as the state of Washington and the nation's capital are named for him. And that, my friends, is a brief biography of George Washington, the man, the myth, the legend, and a beautiful commemorative medal in his honor, and his face on the dollar bill and the quarter. So as you can see, he's everywhere. And I want to thank Austrian Stacker once more for the wonderful gift and letter to me. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this History Monday series, and I hope you join me for the next one. And with that, as always, aloha and mahalo.